The Congress's Chintan Shivir in Rajasthan ended with a whimper, not with a bang. There were no major announcements from the beleaguered party, and that is our focus on the program today as we look at Rahul Gandhi's speech on the broadcast this evening and also look at what to make of this one family, one ticket proposal from the Congress, but with so many caveats that it may never be executed. This is happening as Rajasthan itself is a problem state for the Congress, with the factionalism between Ashok Gehlot and Sachin Pilot now proving to be existential. You've got the Gujarat situation where the Gujarat Working Congress president is sulking openly, including in an interview to the Mojo story, Hardik Patel. And you have Arvind Kejriwal snapping at the heels of the Congress, now displaying a very clear expansionist ambition. What will happen to the Congress party given its denialism and its refusal thus far to make any dramatic or structural changes? That is our focus on the program today. Let's introduce our panel of experts. Arati, Jerath, veteran columnist and journalist, joins us. We're also joined by Vinod Sharma, who's, of course, one of our senior most political analysts and journalists and editors. Welcome to the program after a long gap, Vinod, so it's great to see you. Sanjay Jha, lapsed congressman, sacked congressman, I never quite know how to describe him. And Tehseen Poonawalla, the ever optimistic supporter of the Gandhi family, who's lost many a bet with me on his belief that the Congress will always do better than it eventually does. I have no idea why he's still smiling and why he's still optimistic. All right. Before we get any further, let's play out for you a bit of Rahul Gandhi's speech, an intriguing reference to how senior leaders get demoralized and depressed, but nothing much more dramatic there, except to say a regional party cannot be the counter to Narendra Modi. Listen in.
कभी कभी हमारे जो सीनियर नेता हैं, कार्यकर्ता हैं, कभी कभी थोड़ा डिप्रेशन में चले जाते हैं. नॉर्मल बात है, क्योंकि देखिए लड़ाई आसान नहीं है. आप ये मत सोचिए कि ये लड़ाई आसान है. ये लड़ाई रीजनल पार्टी नहीं लड़ सकती, क्योंकि ये विचारधारा की लड़ाई है. आपने देखा एक विचारधारा आरएसएस की विचारधारा कांग्रेस की विचारधारा के खिलाफ लड़ रही है. बीजेपी कांग्रेस की बात करेगी, कांग्रेस के नेताओं की बात करेगी, कांग्रेस के कार्यकर्ताओं की बात करेगी, मगर रीजनल पार्टी की बात नहीं करेगी, क्योंकि वो जानते हैं कि रीजनल पार्टी जो है उनकी जगह है, मगर वो बीजेपी को नहीं हरा सकते हैं, क्योंकि उनके पास विचारधारा नहीं है.
Very interesting comments given two developments over the weekend. One, Arvind Kejriwal in Kerala, of all states in Kerala, exhorting the people there to look for a new option. And we have those images of Mr. Kejriwal in the south. Remember, he's been traveling literally all across India from Gujarat now to Kerala. And also, simultaneously, you've had the Trinamool Congress not giving up on Mamata Banerjee's own sort of positioning. And you've had a campaign launched, and we'll take a look at that also, which speaks about Mamata Banerjee for 2024. This campaign coming from the Trinamool Congress. Both of these things have happened, as Rahul Gandhi has said, that a regional party simply cannot take on Prime Minister Modi. Tehseen, let me bring you in. You're never depressed. Rahul Gandhi says the senior congressmen often get depressed. My point is, shouldn't you all be a little depressed?
You started the show by asking me why am I smiling. So that reminds me of the old Hindi song, one of the classics. तुम इतना जो मुस्कुरा रहे हो, क्या गम है जिसको छुपा रहे हो. So sometimes you smile because you just, you live in hope and optimism. But I want to address two very specific points, Barkha. A, to your very specific question with regards to regional parties. I think the Congress needs to address the elephant in the room, and that is this: that when the BJP makes alliances with regional parties, it could have been Akali Dal, it could have been Nitish Ji's party, it could have been Chandrababu Naidu Ji's party, or even when they attempted with Shiv Sena, the BJP grows at the expense of the regional party. However, in terms of the Congress, that is the reverse. So the Congress tends to shrink when there's a regional party. Look at Mayawati when they had an alliance with, look at Kejriwal 2013, or any other alliances that the Congress has been in. The Congress tends to, Lalu Prasad Yadavji, etc. So the Congress tends to shrink when there's a regional party. So the Congress has a very fine balancing act. How does it continue to be relevant as a national party and keep its state units alive? Because to be a national party, your state units have to be active. Yet, how does it forge an alliance in Odisha, in West Bengal, in Kerala, in other places in Maharashtra, while keeping its state and national unit alive? I think that's a question for the Congress. But I have a larger question that I want to address, and I'd like to take it to the experts, at least Vinodji and Arati, because Sanjay is a political animal. In this particular case, you see, yesterday Rahul Ji was speaking about communication. Now, you may have all these Chintan Shivirs, you can have all these great strategies for communication, but if you're not going to be on the ground and implement them, they mean nothing. Now, you see, when Rahul Ji was speaking yesterday was a Thomas Cup final. The communication department should have anticipated the Thomas Cup final and preponed Rahul Ji's speech. Having said that, I understand they missed that opportunity. When the results came in that the Thomas Cup India won, it was a historic victory, immediately a chit should have gone up to Rahul Ji and he should have announced it. You should have anticipated channels will cut out of Rahul Ji and move to the Thomas Cup. This is not against Rahul Ji or the Congress. Even if the Honorable Prime Minister is speaking, channels would have cut out and gone to the Thomas Cup. Now, Rahul Gandhi out there would have announced India's won it. There would have been a cheer. All of the channels, including you, would have been forced to carry that bite. So sometimes, what you're trying to do is we sometimes make enemies out of people who are in a situation. There's no point attacking people. How do you use a situation use the situation to the best advantage? And that is what is relevant in 2022. You got to think on your feet. This should have been the moment where Rahul Gandhi, a national leader, would have congratulated our badminton team before Prime Minister Modi. You lost that opportunity. Now, why are you angry in the media?
And the other important point you make is about not being on the ground. But there would be a third point that I would make that I don't know if you'd agree with, which is about acknowledging that politics in India today is a 24/7 sport, since we're using the metaphor of sport. And Mr. Gandhi's frequent sort of forays outside India, which may be sort of, a regular Joe's life. This is not a luxury that is afforded to him anymore, but he doesn't seem to agree with that. Before I go to Arati and Vinod, Sanjay, you still support this party from what I can tell, but you're exasperated, you're critical, you believe they're in absolute denial. What do you make of these 3 days in Udaipur?
I consider it, Barkha, as a missed opportunity because you really practically can't get 400 people to create a political strategy. So my fundamental problem is the mechanics too. Ideally, your leaders of a top team of 40, 50 people, not just from Delhi, but across the country, should have huddled up together. And they should have actually found answers before coming to Udaipur, having, met with workers and talked to various other constituencies. And then 40, 50 people should have decided on what was the way forward. Because then you can really have a dialogue back and forth, etc., etc. And then after an agreement was reached, the Congress could have convened an AICC meet and talked about the way forward. So I feel the mechanics has been pretty awful. I also want to make two short points, Barkha, because I'm very keen to listen to what Arati and Tehseen and Vinodji have to say later. There are three challenges before the Congress. One is ideological, which is, hey, how are you going to tackle the BJP's aggressive Hindutva campaign? You can see what's happening in Varanasi now with the Gyanvapi mosque issue. How do you really address this issue of Hinduism versus Hindutva? It can't be Rahul Gandhi making it in one munch and then the party doesn't talk about it, but Rahul is the only one who's going to be the torchbearer of communal harmony. I think this is not the way a democratic party functions. Number two, organizational. They have talked about some changes, right? That not more than 5 years. I'm going to give you just one acid test for the Congress. Rahul has already been the president of the party for 1.5 to 2 years. If he were to come back as president, I would like him to publicly say that I will be the president only for 3 years more, because that's a 5-year tenure. Are we going to do that? Are people going to walk the talk? I think it's not going to be enough to just indulge in rhetoric. Number three, leadership. I do believe that I would have loved to hear some accountability. Barkha, I'm going to be very honest with you. Okay, all of us have failed at many an occasion. I've been in the corporate sector. I've been in the financial, very competitive, cutthroat industry. We didn't do well every year, yeah, and we took the heat when it came. And my logic on leadership is very simple: if the heat in the kitchen is too strong, leave it. And I do believe that Rahul's saying that the leadership gets depressed. Well, what do you expect of people who have struggled all their
Yeah.
life, seen the Congress at the peak, and are now reporting to you that you make a statement that I have been born in power, I'm not hungry for it. Well, my question to Rahul is, Rahul, if you're not hungry for power, there is no way you can protect the ideology that you fight for. You need to be in power for your
Yeah.
policies, programs, and philosophy. So I
And
think
it's
this is a missed opportunity.
interesting that he keeps positioning himself as an ideologically distinctive alternative, because at least reports suggest that two veterans of the party, Bhupesh Baghel and Kamal Nath, spoke about worries that people perceive the Congress to be distant from Hindus. A.K. Antony has been on record in one of those multifarious reports of the Congress party suggesting the same. So this is a question, but it's not the only question before the Congress. There is that leadership issue, which is the elephant in the room. Vinod ji, if I can get you in, what do you make of what's happened? Nothing big happened. I mean, if I had to say in one line, nothing big happened. What is preventing the Congress, you think, from making any big changes? Do they not realize how dire the situation is for them? Vinod?
Well, the question is to me. Well,
Yes.
I think what's preventing the Congress is a very broad question. One has to list very many points. But Chintan Shivir in Udaipur it's disappointing for me on one count. You see, the one big thing which is lacking today in the Congress game plan, if there is a game plan, is not that is not as much about the organization, because organizational issues can be set right. You can induct young people at different positions in the party. You can give tickets to young people. These are all doable things. The most undoable thing in the present situation is, what narrative does the Congress has to offer as an alternative to the BJP's retrogressive Hindutva and also its cultural, military, economic nationalism, so-called nationalism. What does the Congress stand for today? This is the question I wanted answered in the Shivir. Now, you see, when the Shivir started, there was a speech by the Congress president, which was, I think, a very balanced speech, and that is the kind of speech which one requires. But then at the end, there was a speech by Rahul Gandhi. And you people are missing out a very important point which he made in that speech, where he says that I am not scared of anyone, that I am not scared of BJP and RSS, because I have not earned a single penny out of the pocket of Bharat Mata. In other words, he was trying to say that he's got nothing to hide. Now, what is the purpose of the leader of a prominent political party to be saying at such a gathering that he has nothing to hide? Is the implication that others have a lot to hide? And I have heard from congressmen attributing this to Rahul, that Rahul believes that some of the old guard have a lot to hide. They have skeletons in the cupboard, and thereby they are, they are prone to coming under pressure from the government or its agencies. And that is why he should have a set of new players who have a clean slate and who'd be able to forcefully carry forward the program which he has in mind. Now, if that is the blueprint he has in his mind, then he must state it clearly. Now, all
Right.
these movements we saw at the Chintan Shivir, for 50, below 50, you will have young people and all that. It is all moving towards, indicating towards that. But the biggest gap at the Chintan Shivir was a clear-cut position by the Congress party. Does the Congress party own up its past or not? Does the Congress party own up Pandit Nehru or not? Does the Congress party own up all the achievements that happened under Pandit Nehru and thereby under Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi or not? That is the big question.
Yeah.
Because
So
it was Nehru
yeah.
who laid the basis of the modern India. And they are
Yes, but the
dumping
point
Nehru,
is, do you
the
change?
man who gave them the party and gave them the country, the modern India
Well, I
that we
think.
have.
But let me take this to Arti. The point is, it's very difficult for the Congress to make a pure ideological point anymore, because it is, for example, now in government with the Shiv Sena in Maharashtra. Recently, you saw the Shiv Sena and the BJP argue publicly over who actually brought down the Babri Masjid, which is now, of course, where the Ram Mandir stands, sanctioned by the Supreme Court. But there was a demolition that took place in the 90s. So, there might be people too young to even remember that moment of 1992. But you have two parties arguing about it. One of them is in partnership with the Congress. The Congress will find it extremely difficult to make a pure play ideological argument, especially in the absence, Arti, of 24/7 presence on the ground.
Oh, absolutely. Barkha. You see, there are four main challenges before the Congress today. And unfortunately, none of these challenges were addressed at the Shivir, which is why the Shivir is, you're calling it a damp squib. One, of course, is the leadership question. And this big, Rahul Gandhi question. Will he, won't he? What we saw, unfortunately, very disappointingly, is it looks like status quo will continue, where Rahul has power without accountability. He is de facto president, but he will not step up and assume that role, so that Congress people know where the buck stops. In fact, nobody knows where the buck stops today, right? Because Sonia Gandhi is an interim president, and Rahul Gandhi is the de facto president, but he doesn't hold any kind of official post. So that's one big problem. The second is, he talked about an ideological fight, and he was, kind of quite dismissive of regional parties, saying they have no ideology, they are caste, this, that. This is an ideological fight between the Congress and the RSS BJP. But he made no effort to spell out that ideology. And given the fact that there are many in the Congress, as articulated by Bagel and Kamal Nath and so on, that the Congress should do a Hindu outreach, the Congress should not be perceived to be pro-Muslim. If you're not going to be clear what is your ideology, he didn't even use the word secularism. Did you notice? He evaded that S word, because it's become such a four-letter word in today's politics, and scared to articulate it. So so I think if this ideological grayness, this fuzziness continues, I mean, how are you going to tackle the BJP, which has a very clear Hindutva agenda, and it's very pointed and sharp, and it's got a violent edge to it? But how are you going to tackle it if you don't if you are not clear what your ideology is? The third thing is nationalism. Listen, nationalism was the Congress's calling card. They led the fight for independence, and they were always identified with nationalism till the BJP stole it away from under their nose and redefined it as muscular majoritarianism. Now, what the Congress did not even address this issue at the Shivir. Nationalism is an emotive appeal.
Yeah.
If the Congress does not, reclaim it and define nationalism as it sees, as it feels it should be defined, instead of this muscular majoritarianism that we're seeing, I mean, what is the emotive connect to people then? Where is the emotive connect going to come from? And of course, the fourth point is this grayness on allies. Your declaration says that the door is open for alliances. You are in alliance in Maharashtra and Jharkhand. But Rahul Gandhi stands up and very, sort of contemptuously dismisses regional parties, saying that they have no ideology. Not just that they can't stand up to the BJP. In fact, if you see in state elections, it is the regional parties that are fighting the BJP, not the Congress. The Congress
And
is run over, you know.
and it's hard place to understand where this contempt is coming from, given the problems that are happening in two different states, one that has just gone to the polls and the other that is going to go to the polls. And I'm talking, of course, about Punjab and Gujarat. So let me play out two different clips, and then I want Tehseen and Sanjay to react right away. One is from Hardik Patel, who, of course, is the working president of the Congress party in Gujarat. But as he told me, he said, I'm a working president without work. He confirmed that it was 25, now 27 days ago, that Rahul Gandhi and he had exchanged messages. Rahul promised to have a conversation with him, and that conversation has not happened. And he had this message for Rahul Gandhi about the 24/7 nature of politics. Listen in.
सवाल इतना है कि मेरी उम्र 28 साल है, मैं हर दिन 300-400 किलोमीटर की यात्रा करता रहता हूँ, गाड़ी से इधर से उधर लोगों के बीच जाते। एक बात से तो मैं सहमत हूँ कि राजनीति करनी है तो 24 घंटा करनी चाहिए। राजनीति में आए हो तो लोगों से लगातार मिलना पड़ता है, राजनीति में आए हो तो लोगों से बातचीत करनी पड़ती है। अगर राजनीति में आए हो तो सामने वाला आपसे क्या उम्मीद रखता है, आपसे क्यों नाराज है, उसका क्लेरिफिकेशन उसके साथ बैठ के करना पड़ेगा। तो मेरा यही मानना है कि तभी हम स्वाभाविक रूप से जो लोग नाराज है उसकी नाराजगी को हम समझ पाएंगे। बरखा जी, मैं बहुत कम लोगों से ये बात कह चुका हूँ, आपसे ये कह रहा हूँ कि आपको छोड़ के या आपसे नाराज जो भी लोग है वो आपसे दूर जा रहा है, उसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वो बिक गया है या वो खरीद गया, वो डर गया। हमें झांकना अपने आप में पड़ेगा कि हमारी ऐसी क्या गलती है कि लगातार लोग हमसे छोड़ के जा रहे हैं या हमसे नाराज होते जा रहे हैं। गुजरात की बात करते हैं अपन, मैं गुजरात की पॉलिटिक्स से जुड़ा हुआ हूँ ज्यादा, तो गुजरात की बात करता हूँ। पिछले 5 साल के भीतर 20 एमएलए चले गए हैं, 17 पूर्व एमएलए चले गए हैं, पार्टी की सेकंड और थर्ड लीडरशिप के 100 से अधिक नेता चले गए हैं। तो अगर आप ये बोलेंगे कि ये सब बिक गए हैं, ये सब खरीद गए हैं, ये सब डर गए हैं, तो नहीं, शायद हमारी भी कुछ गलती हो सकती है, हमें समझना पड़ेगा।
तो हमारे को जो छोड़ के जा रहे हैं तहसीन, इसका ये नहीं मतलब कि वो बिक गए, वो डरे हुए हैं, कि उनकी कोई आइडियोलॉजी नहीं है। And of course, the reminder of 24/7 politics. I want your comments on this, Tehseen. Can we unmute Tehseen? Yeah, go ahead, Tehseen.
Thank you, Barkha. Very often on your show, I keep saying, look, the more outsiders you suddenly parachute, there will be a problem. And I can go on and say, look, this fits to that theory. But no, actually, I agree partially with what Hardik is saying. And this is the problem, Barkha. And I was again tweeting about this yesterday, and I was talking. Let me not talk about political people. Let me just talk about the media. Now, one of the graphs that the Congress party has is that the media is avoiding it. It's not giving it the coverage that it deserves. But you look, you cannot keep making enemies of the media, your departments trolling media or media personalities. Politics is the art of making friends, not making enemies. Politics is the art of building bridges, not destroying bridges. So no matter what differences you have with people, you need to pick up the phone.
But what do you make of the fact that Rahul Gandhi has not spoken to Hardik Patel for 25 days since Hardik Patel reached out to him?
Now, that's a specific thing. That's Hardik's side of the story. I don't know the story, and it'll be unfair for me to comment on something. There are a lot of things about Hardik that I don't want to put on record here. So it's there's always the different sides to the story. But I want to take I want the Congress to understand one thing, and again, this comes from the heart. Look, this narrative that the Hindu vote is for the BJP is absolutely rubbish. In a country where 79 or 80% of the population are Hindu, Vinod is a Hindu, Arati is a Hindu, you are a Hindu, Sanjay is a Hindu, where 80% of the population is Hindu, the BJP manages to get 35% of the vote. That means it doesn't even get all the Hindu votes. And the Congress gets a lot of Hindu votes. The regional parties here. What is this nonsense that our Hindu fellow citizens are voting for BJP? The BJP is not a Hindu party. Now, what I agree with Vinod is absolutely right. The Congress needs to articulate and own up to its past. It has a glorious history. It needs to own up. Now, I want to make one example here that Vinod had given me. I don't know if Vinod remembers this example, but he told me this example and he predicted this in 2014 to me at a news channel studio. And Vinod said, look, there was a Baba who's very close to the present government. He continues to be close to the government, who insulted Nehruji and called Nehruji Maut ka Saudagar. The entire Congress should have been on the ground. Vinodji, I don't know if you remember this example. The Congress did a press conference with a new spokesperson, every single day. Let me give you another example. There was a news anchor, I'm going slightly away, who said Aditya Thackeray is the Rahul Gandhi of politics. The news anchor and the news channel had to apologize. I don't agree in bullying. I don't agree that you should bully. Day in and day out, the Gandhis are mocked, abused, threatened, called all sorts of names. Where is the Congress party? Why is it not on the ground? People should, I'm not saying again.
Why the Congress party? The Gandhis need to be on the ground, right? The Gandhis
everyone needs to be on the ground. So I'm just trying to say that if you can let, in 2014, while you're still in government, let some random person.
Okay, hang on. You've taken this conversation in different direction. You're talking about Ramdev. Ramdev was in fact referencing Sonia Gandhi's description of the Prime Minister, then Gujarat leader, as Maut ka Saudagar, and said, if Sonia Gandhi says this about Narendra Modi, then well, Nehru is...
Can I add to it? I just want to add one line to it. That wasn't true, but let me just add one line to it. Even if that was true, the new
What is not true? What is not true? This
What
is what Ramdev said.
What Ramdev said was not true, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. You see how the Congress has lost the information.
But see what you just did here. See what you just did here. I played for you a clip of Hardik Patel, a disgruntled leader in Gujarat. You have started talking to me about Nehru. What is the connection between the two things? The Congress, you see, in journalism, they teach you. Tehseen, let me give you an example from my life. In journalism, they teach you that you are only as good as your last story, right? So just because I did some great work 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it doesn't mean that I can say, hey, I did some great work 20 years ago. I have to keep doing great work. So yes, great Nehru built modern India, but what are you doing today? And I want to bring in Sanjay at this point on Hardik Patel.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Look, the Congress has to its advantage a great legacy. It has a fabulous legacy, which it fails to encash or it fails to take forward. At the same time, this legacy needs certain amount of modification. You need to be 2022 on your feet thinking and invent new methods of being on the ground and communicating. You're failing to do that. So you're failing on two fronts. So the Congress is failing on two fronts. That's all that I'm trying to say.
Okay, Sanjay, on Hardik Patel as an example of what's going on in the States. Please come in.
Well, Barkha, I think every time somebody leaves the party, the Congress party mocks them for being betrayers of their secular ideology and selling out to the BJP. I think Hardik answered it brilliantly on your show. I think, when you lose talent, Barkha, if you were to lose a couple of good people from your Mojo team, or I lost people from the bank where I used to work for, you actually spend sleepless nights. But Rahul Gandhi comes up and says, I don't care who leaves the party. This is a fight for the ideology. I just think this is a lot of a hollow humbug. Let me be very transparent with you. I like Rahul as an individual. I think he's unfit to be the leader of the Congress party. Rahul would be better off leading a small startup political party where he can fashion it the way he wants to. This is the grand old party. Like, for example, a young MBA who emerges from any sexy university, you cannot head a Microsoft. But yeah, you can head a small little startup that might get a huge valuation. I'm just giving you an analogy here. Rahul is not fit to lead the Congress party. I'm saying it in black and white terms. Let me give you two examples on your show based on your questions. And once again, I say this with great respect for Rahul. Whatever he's trying, good luck. He's saying that regional parties are not fit to take on the BJP is factually incorrect. And therefore, as a leader, when you make these statements, you send out a terrible signal to many opposition parties, especially those who are ex-Congress, saying that you still snigger at them because you have that same old Delhi Darbari arrogance, which is, in my opinion, terrible for the Congress party to demonstrate at a time when they're facing an existential crisis. Number two, I would have liked it if Rahul had said openly during the Chintan Shivir that if the senior people are upset and feeling depressed, I understand their pain. You cannot dismiss it away. I was just thinking, if I was Kamal Nath today, if I was Digvijay Singh today, who have been chief ministers, if I was P. Chidambaram today, who, by the way, once upon a time was considered a potential prime minister, and is today, these people are struggling to get their voice heard, I would hold only one person responsible, and that is Rahul. Because when you're a leader, Barkha, you got to set the standard. And I believe in the theory that a political party, a country, a company becomes like the leader they have. You
Yeah.
need a leader in the party who's aggressive, who's articulate, who inspires people, who talks a language that common people vibe
So,
with.
so,
Where
so,
do we
so,
have
so
that?
so let me say it, ask Vinod and Arti actually the $1 million question. Could there be a mutiny in the Congress? We saw glimmers of it with this group of 23. Not much has, in fact, moved. Many have left. Others will leave. Hardik Patel's could be next. His comment, Vinod, ki jo chhod ke jate hain, wo sab bike hue ya dare hue nahi hote. He's talking about himself. He said, I'm 28, 29 years old. I don't want to wait for another 20 years before something moves in my career. I think that's fair, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fair. But Hardik Patel, I mean, he has to take his call. I mean, rather than staying in cribbing, I mean, he must take his call and leave the party. You see, the big problem in the Congress is that people who are in the Congress, they aren't as much unsure about their own future as the future of the Congress itself. And the Congress's future shall appear bright and promising if the Congress puts its act together and wins a couple of elections. Now, how can it win a couple of elections? By providing an alternative narrative. Now, Rahul Gandhi has said that the regional parties lack ideology. Barkha, may I tell you, I have the greatest respect, regardless of what people may think about Lalu Yadav, that here is a man who had stood on his principle of secularism and has never compromised on that. Mamta Banerjee has compromised. I think the Congress party has a lesson of to learn from Lalu Yadav. Mamta Banerjee compromised, but Lalu never compromised. Similarly, recently there was a video by Stalin when the honorable Prime Minister, leveled the charge of dynasty against DMK, and he says, "I'm proud of my lineage. I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of what I have inherited. I'm proud that I am the son of Karnanidhi. I'm proud that I am a leader of the DMK." And later in the assembly, in a speech to mark his first year in office, he said, "I am not Kalaiganar. I can't write like him. I can't speak like him. But I promise to work as hard as he worked." That is the way to own up your legacy. Sonia Gandhi once said that we are called a party of Muslims. I'm sorry. Congress was always a party of Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs and Christians. It had every single political stream in its womb. And from that emerged the centrist line. Jayapal Reddy used to call it the first coalition of ideas which came to rule India. Why are you ashamed of saying? You say that where did Malviya came from? Where did Malviya come from? Madan Mohan Malviya. Where did EMS come from? Here was a party which was the fountainhead of all ideologies because it was to India, a miniaturized India. It represented India. It fell from grace in the eyes of the people when it started taking a tilt, making a tilt towards on crucial issues, rather than
Yeah.
handling them more cautiously.
So,
So Congress has to sort out its vocabulary. Congress has to sort out its language, its vocabulary, and it will automatically get its ideology if it reverts to its
and
founding principles.
let me put that to Arti. Hang on, Vinod. Let me put that to Arti. If the Congress sorts out its narrative, is the battle half won, or is the leadership issue, which we just heard from Sanjay, which Tehseen will not concede, is that the main problem? That, as Sanjay said, any non-performing leader, if a company reports a loss year on year on year on year, that company's CEO has to go. I know politics is different. I know there are ups and downs. I know the BJP took decades to go from the 2 to the 84, 85, and then to where it is today. But let's say, I think somebody made this point that if Narendra Modi lost, a significant series of elections, I don't think he'd continue to lead the BJP. The Congress just doesn't seem to have that principle. Arti.
No, absolutely. I think the Congress has a whole lot of problems, Barkha. I mean, yes, narrative. or ideology is one major problem. Leadership is another problem. Organization is a third problem. And I mean, there are so many problems that the Congress has to address that, just addressing one is not going to help the Congress win. What the Congress desperately needs is an electoral success. That's what it desperately needs. When it won those three elections in 2018, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, it was a huge boost to Rahul Gandhi and the Congress. When it nearly won Gujarat the year before, it was a huge boost to Rahul Gandhi and the Congress. But what did the Congress do? They didn't build on those successes. They just frittered them away. And today, sitting here today, I can see the Congress losing Rajasthan. I can see the Congress may even lose Chhattisgarh. Madhya Pradesh is gone anyway. So, the point, what it needs to concentrate on today, I think the first thing it needs to get an electoral success under its
But
belt.
where?
Listen, over the next 2 years, all the elections that are coming up are in states where it is BJP versus Congress. All of them. Starting with Himachal, going on to Gujarat, Karnataka, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, all of them are Congress versus BJP. Surely out of these 5-6 elections, the Congress should be able to register a couple of successes, because until it registers a couple of successes, I don't think everything else will follow. Once you get a success, things start falling into place. But you need that win. And I'm afraid that's what the Congress doesn't do. Punjab, look at what they did on the eve of elections. They threw a bomb, at themselves and self-destructed.
Yeah, and talking about Punjab,
you can't do that, right?
And talking about Punjab, we've been talking about the Hindus and how the Hindus, do they feel distant from the Congress? Do they not? In Punjab, Sunil Jakhar is on record saying that Ambika Soni treated him as a pariah just because he was Hindu. Now, forget the internecine battles within the Congress, but Jakhar, as he sort of slams the door in the face of the Congress, had this to say.
मैं अगर कांग्रेस के अंदर इतने साल लिप गया तो उसका बहुत बड़ा कारण राहुल गांधी जी मैं आज भी मानता हूं. अगर वो और कोई छोटे दिल का व्यक्ति वहां बैठा था उससे पहले ये तोड़ बिछड़ा उससे पहले भी हो लेना था. परंतु राहुल जी आपको भी आजकल एयरक्राफ्ट्स के अंदर ये सुखोई और वहां पे लड़ाई चल रही है उनके अंदर एवरी एयरक्राफ्ट इवन टैंक्स के अंदर भी एक होता है IFF कॉल्ड आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ फ्रेंड और फो. दुश्मन और दोस्त की पहचान कराने के लिए उसके अंदर इंस्ट्रूमेंट लगा होता है जो फ्रीक्वेंसी आपस में एक्सचेंज करके पता करता है कि मैं जिस पे मिसाइल दाग रहा हूं वो कोई मेरा दोस्त तो नहीं है. आपने इन पिछलगुओं के कहने से मेरे पे नोटिस की मिसाइल दाग दी. मेरा क्या बिगाड़ देंगे आप? पर आपने अगर पार्टी चलानी है तो ये आपको फैसले लेने पड़ेंगे. ये कमान अपने हाथ में लेनी पड़ेगी. ऐसे चापलूस लोगों से, इन बेगैरत लोग हैं. मैंने वहां पे एक बड़ी नेता को गिड़गिड़ाते देखा है कि मेरे को टिकटों की उसमें कमेटी के अंदर रहने दिया जाए. राहुल जी ने मना कर दिया था, शी हैज वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट. उसके बावजूद वो गिड़गिड़ा के, उनके लिए बहुत बड़ी बात है. परंतु इन चापलूस और बेगैरत लोगों के बीच में रह के मैं समझता हूं हमारी जो कांग्रेस की नेतृत्व है वो गैरतमंद लोगों से बात करना और उनके सलीके को भूल गए हैं. परंतु ये आपको मुबारक हो, ये चापलूस आपको मुबारक हो.
ये चापलूस आपको मुबारक हो. Let's take last comments. Vinod, I'll start with you. Vinod, go ahead. Okay, I don't think Vinod's on the best of lines. Let's bring in Sanjay. Sanjay, go ahead. Yes, if you can hear me, Vinod, go ahead. Okay, Sanjay, let's bring you in. Sanjay, go ahead.
Frankly speak.
Yeah, go ahead,
Hello.
Sanjay.
Yeah, Barkha, in my opinion, the Congress needs to understand this is not a joke. It is not a media manufactured term. Existential crisis stares it in the face. And you know why I'm disappointed? Because a lot of people I meet come and tell me, we seem to know what the solutions to the problems of the Congress party are. What is your leadership doing? What are the ivory towers doing? And frankly speaking, Rahul by now should know that a leader needs to communicate. He needs to be out there He needs to engage with his own team. You cannot make the Congress party defeat the BJP by making speeches against RSS and the BJP and Mr. Modi. That is not a political business model. As Arati said, you need to start winning. You can't win by simply lamenting how bad things are. You need to be out there actually winning the trust of the people. And therefore, I'm going to make one suggestion through your program to good friend Rahul. Mr. Gandhi, take your speeches seriously. That's what we're discussing today, Rahul. Today, Barkha. Think about it. Even Barack Obama, one of the world's best orators, used a teleprompter. There's nothing wrong with it. Mr. Modi doesn't do a press conference because he knows he can't do it, right? But he doesn't care. He's found an alternative, but he does it all the time. He speaks from a script all the time. Rahul Gandhi needs to understand you can't just go off the cuff, make random statements. You end up hurting your party and yourself. This is not the way to fight for Indian democracy.
Okay, Arti, those comments by Sunil Jakhar, I mean, a kind of unprecedented, obviously a man who has nothing left to lose in a way, but, there is a ripple effect when he underlines again and again that I was sidelined because I'm a Hindu, and in Punjab, there isn't any such differentiation in the way that Ambika Soni and my party sought to make it. It will have an impact elsewhere. It's just a perception of one more Congress or ex-Congress state now imploding.
Absolutely, Barkha. I mean, and there are a lot of them who are, just standing in line waiting to leave. Sunil Jakhar has been, I do think that he was very unfairly treated by the Congress, because I believe when they had that meeting with the MLAs, he won the majority of votes. They wanted him as chief minister. But yes, they overruled it. They ruled that vote because they said he's a Hindu. And, so this whole thing of, you have to have a Sikh, then you choose this guy Chani because he's a Dalit. It's ridiculous. But, as I said before, my prescription for the Congress would be, look, let's first concentrate on winning an election. There are 6 elections coming up over the next 2 years. Please, the big things can follow, leadership, ideology, nationalism, all that can follow. But at least, get something going on the ground, get your organization in those states in order so that you can deliver a victory and restore your credibility as a leader.
Absolutely. But Vinod,
that has to be Rahul Gandhi's first task.
Vinod, if you can hear me, if you want to come in on Mr. Jakhar.
Yeah, I was hearing Arati. If wishes were horses, Arati. You see, you have to win an election. You have to go to the people with a narrative. You can't just go to elections with a set of faces without a narrative. And that is why my emphasis is on a narrative from day one. You see, 2 references have been made to past events. One about why Sunil Jakhar is upset, and second, what Ramdev said. Ramdev said it, called Nehru a mass murderer in the context of the 47 violence, in the presence of the top leadership of the BJP. And at that point, the Congress was quiet. And Sanjay Jha was part of the Congress at that time. And I say it as a friend to Sanjay, and he may have had his problems, But there was no response from the Congress party. Sunil Jakhar left, who got upset when Ambika Soni got out of a meeting and said that they were asking me to become chief minister, and I said that it should go to a Sikh. Now, look at it. Something which transpires confidentially between the leadership and a leader is stated publicly before cameras. And suggestion and the reasons given why one person did not take the offer is a party run like this, running commentary on the closed door meetings. Mr. Rawat used to give running commentary when he was a troubleshooter in Punjab. In fact, he was actually a troublemaker in Punjab, because I was following Punjab very closely at that time. I say it with a lot of respect. I know Mr. Rawat very well. And there are many good things about him. But here was a man who was expected to lead the party in Himachal Pradesh, doing all the firefighting in Punjab, and actually ending up spreading the fire in Punjab.
Uttarakhand.
In Uttarakhand.
So what they did to my state, You see, the problem is that Mr. Sunil Jakhar has been saying this even during the course of the elections. So if the
Yes,
Congress
he
party
did.
has lost the election, he is as much responsible. He did not hold
Well,
his
it also
horses.
speaks. Well, it also speaks to
He
the
did not.
eroding authority of the leadership with
No,
respect, Vinod,
Sunil
because
Jakhar is one of the few thinking leaders the Congress has. He's a very well-read man. बहुत पढ़े लिखे आदमी हैं, लेकिन उनको इतने आहत हो गए हैं कि बार बार एक ही बात दोहरा रहे हैं, और ये 5-6 बार दोहराया उन्होंने। जो मोजो को इंटरव्यू दिया और अब जो फेसबुक पे बोला, ये करीबन 8वीं-10वीं बार एक ही बात वो कह रहे हैं। He is really been deeply hurt. Somebody should have reached out to him by now in order to reassure him that he is required in the Congress party. There were a couple of decisions which was wrongly taken or wrongly judged or whatever, but he should have been reassured. Nobody reassured him. The problem is, you see, I also have an explanation. You know, a very top leader, I would not name him, but he's now a minister in the Congress, in the BJP government. I mean, he left the Congress because of nothing else. You see, when he lost the election, nobody reached out to tell him that, look, it is fine, yeah. You are equally valued in the party. You see, that is what you have to do to keep your
So I think
troops
the point,
intact.
I think Tehseen, quickly, the point is that both external and internal communication is a problem. It's not just external communication. As we saw with Hardik, as we saw when a Jyotiraditya Scindia left, or a Jitin Prasad left, or a RPN Singh left, and as we now see with Sunil Jakhar. Tehseen, quick last word.
Yeah, I agree with Vinod ji there. I mean, like I said in your earlier segment, politics is the art of making friends. You need to pick up the phone and speak. Look at the talent the Congress has lost. It lost Jyotiraditya, and I know I'm going to be trolled for this. It's lost Himanta Biswa. You like him, dislike him, he's talented. It lost Shehzad Poonawalla, fantastic speaker, my brother. And look at the talent they bring into the Congress. They're bringing Shatrughan Sinha, Kirti Azad. They bring in these guys into the Congress. I mean, look at who's going out and look at who's coming in. Second point. In 2019, I told one of the tallest leaders in the Congress, amongst the biggest, that there's a good chance in 2024, and I've shared this with you, Barkha, that Congress might be a smaller party than the TMC or Jagan's party. I said this in 2019. I've been repeatedly saying this off the record. And that chance has come. There's a larger chance. There could be a period that the Congress may, for the first time in the history of independent India, not have a state on its own. And you want to take an example, look at what's happening in Karnataka. The Congress may or may not win Karnataka, but already infighting is starting. So a vocal leader does not want a Lingayat chief minister. So rumors are put out. The IT cell is trolling them. Put out something, Barkha. Put out something and the IT cell will go after you. That is, we cannot become what we fight. The Congress needs to own its past, as Vinod ji says. It needs to make a constructive opposition. And one last thing. What is the message to the people? Why should you vote the Congress? What is it that you're going to do different from the BJP must be articulated. Yes, we know there's a problem. There's a problem of money, economy, jobs, etc. What are you doing to solve it must be told articulately to people. It cannot just be RSS is taking away your jobs. No. What is it that you will do to create jobs? How, since Nehru's time till today, you created jobs?
I'll have to end.
Sorry.
I'll add just one point. The what, the when, the how are all valid questions that the Congress has to answer, but that who will lead the party? We forget that this is a party without a full-time president. I mean, it is unheard of. Sonia Gandhi is still officially an interim president. But anyway, it looks like it's setting up to be Rahul's Congress. What will that Congress look like? That's the million-dollar question. Leaving it there for now. Tehseen, Sanjay, Vinod, and Arati, pleasure as always having four of you here. And to our audience, thanks for watching. Goodbye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.